Yeah. The loud clatter of books falling into the return slot abruptly breaks the grip of silence over the school library. It's become a habit for me to come to the library at least once a week. Not only does the reading itself keep me busy, but discussing books with Hanako and Lily also does. Obviously startled, Yuko suddenly twists towards the direction of the noise. And I thought her used to people dropping books by now, since she does work here. Oh, hello, Hisao. Back again? It takes me a moment to respond, my mind still distracted by the familiar melody of Lily's humming that hardly left my ears in the several days it's been since I fell asleep to it. Huh? Oh, yeah, just returning some books I borrowed. She cast her eyes downward, presumably to the bin the books dropped into. You're a very heavy reader, aren't you? It's become a bit of a routine now. Passes the time, at least. I wish I had free time to pass. From small talk to depression in less than 5 seconds. I think that's a new record for her. She seems a bit down in general today, even compared to normal. Considering how she has to work 2 jobs just to support herself, I could see how that would take her toll on her lifestyle. Come to think of it, the pay for her job here can't be all that bad. The idea of staff in such a prestigious private school going hungry strikes me as counterintuitive. Working 2 jobs must take a lot of time. I'd probably never manage it. You're lucky being a student. Do you think you'll be able to go to university? If she's asking, then I guess that's the expected result of having this kind of education. Private schools like this don't exactly come cheap. I guess. You have the money, I think. I've got plans which will require going to one, and my grades are good enough. It's more a matter of how I'll pay to do so. University costs so much that I'm having to work 2 jobs to afford to enter it. Paying for daily expenses, too, makes it a lot harder. If you're reading this much, though, that means you're doing well in school, right? Interesting logical jump. Not an altogether wrong one, though. I suppose so. I didn't find any of the exams very hard, aside from maybe 1 or 2. Do you mind if I ask what studies you're pursuing in university? Yuko appears to be genuinely brightened at the question, and I'm pretty good with that because Yuko is just a nice gal, and I actually liked learning more about her. You'd think we would have learned more in the 5 different stories. Anthropology. To be specific, I'm specializing in the history of classical era Athenian civilization and democracy. She seems to really know her stuff. Such enthusiasm is to be admired. It's nice to see her genuinely excited about something. I guess even somebody like Yuko could be happy if she has a visible road ahead of her. That's good to hear. Whoa! Both of us jump at the sudden interruption coming from my pocket. Apologizing profusely and quickly shuffling into the hallway as I fumble with the cover of my mobile phone, I glance at the screen. Weird, it's a mobile number I don't recognize. Considering I can count the number of people with my number on one hand, I briefly wonder whether it's some telemarketer that lucked out. Hello? Is Sound Nakai speaking? Geez, pick up faster next time. Anyway, guess who? It only takes me a second to recognize the distinctively deep, brusque voice. Hey, Misha. Didn't expect you to call me. Huh? Oh, you actually think I sound like her? No, that confused the hell out of me, Sal. I thought it was... not at all, Akira. I don't remember giving you my number, though, so I thought I'd mess with you. Oh, that? I got Lily to give it to me. Not hard. She positively brims with pride at the statement. She's trying to get me caught up in her pace, I know it. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised that the two would share my number, though, given how close they are. So what's up? You free right now? I guess. Why? Could you meet me at the park in town? I just want to talk to you about some stuff. Is that an invitation to a date? What? Of course not. She sounds suddenly crestfallen. Her previous teasing nature as having instantaneously left. Seems strange for her. Anyway, I don't see why not. When do you want to meet? Kinda now-ish? What, right now? But it's... The dead silence coming from the phone announces the fact that she has unceremoniously hung up. For a long time, I just stand there staring at the call ended message on the screen while replaying the conversation in my head. What the hell, Akira? That's concerning. That's deeply concerning to me. Oh boy, okay, Akira, so what's the haps? Throwing a glance up and down the street, I cross the road and step into the park. I've learned to pace myself on such walks, mostly because Lily's slower speed during our forays into town means I have to consciously slow myself down. That aside, I hope Akira doesn't expect me to be immediately prompt. It takes only a couple of seconds to spot her, waiting on a bench with a can of beer in her hand. The look she gives me as I walk up lacks any hint of acknowledgement or greeting. What's with the look? You didn't have come, you know. I knew you would. You're that kind of person, after all. I lower my brow at her remark as she disposes of the can, emptied by the time I arrived, and a metallic clatter rings out. Akira takes a seat on the old wooden bench, and I follow her lead. She takes the can of beer from beside her and opens it before speaking, taking a large gulp. She seems to really like that stuff. I suppose I don't need to ask what this is about, or rather who it's about. I heard from Lily that she asked about her family. They share more than phone numbers, that's for sure. Probably be very worried right now if it weren't for the total lack of malice in her voice. Rather, her tone sounds almost wistful. Idle curiosity, mostly. I have to admit, I'd never guessed you two were half Scottish. She gives a wry chuckle of amusement. I've heard that before, trust me. The small smile falls from her face, her eyes looking ahead distantly. Aside from the occasional elderly couple talking as they slowly walk the meandering paths and the odd aging car, it's pleasantly quiet. She didn't tell you everything, though, did she? It was pretty brief. Your parents live in Scotland, she hasn't met them since she was 12, and she wants to meet them again. It's always surprised me how devoted she is to our parents for all the good they did us. The way she says it almost sounds derisive. She gives a small sigh as if to quickly brush the feelings aside. Why do you think they left, Hisao? Why do I think they left? From what Lily told me, it was because of work. I guess a pretty decently paying job was involved as well, given the way your parents seem to live. So Lily went to a private school, and that's why she carries herself with the airs and graces of the upper class. Yeah, since the building in Inverness boomed, our father decided to move directly to the same city as its headquarters. That's just a conclusion I thought you'd come to, though. You're too good-natured. You don't think they left for their career? I'm sitting here whining to you about it. What do you think? Yamaku Academy. I always felt that place was kind of creepy. Like it was an isolated hideaway for those proper society don't want you to see nor hear. They probably just rue the fact that Lily wasn't old enough to be shoved there by the time they left. A long silence follows her abrupt and very harsh criticism of her own parents and Yamaku. Lily's blindness is hardly something that could be simply ignored for a high-class family attempting to keep up appearances, much less so when a lucrative offer is on the table. Eventually, Akira gives a derisive snort, her feelings coming to a head. Moving to secure our financial future with his new job posting, even at times I hardly believed it. Not wanting to simply be an avenue for venting, I gently tried to steer the discussion. So you stayed in Japan with Lily, then? Either I stayed with her, or she went to live with an ailing grandmother and grandfather. What about Shizune's family? If you're cousins, then... Our fathers hate each other. I'd have been more happy to tell them to go screw themselves and live with them anyway, but Lily wouldn't have wanted that. I also had an offer for a job by then, so we did our best to keep our parents' house in proper shape and try to continue our lives as if they'd never left. So you just lived by yourselves? Basically. Lily had school and I had my job, so we weren't exactly languishing. With her schooling, her study, and having to do chores while I worked, though, I can't help feeling like I failed her. In the end, I tried to be there for her and screwed it up. Expecting a 19-year-old to be a mother for a blind child. It's ridiculous. So, Lily and Akira alone after their parents moved, with Lily largely taking care of herself. I guess that explains her apparent independence compared to many in Yamaku. I may have lived alone much of the time since my parents both worked, but that's just something else entirely. Sorry to make you listen to my moaning, Hisao. I don't mind at all, but do you mind if I ask why you're telling me all this? You always were curious. Context, I suppose. Life isn't a fairy tale, Hisao. Some people have to learn that the hard way. She takes a long drink from the can in her hand, her face becoming more depressed than distant. I broke up with my boyfriend a few days ago. After I leave, we're not going to be able to see each other again. Well, that's how life is. You can't just set your life up and expect it to stay that way the same forever. Sometimes stuff happens that you just have to roll with, even if it means hurting yourself or others. She takes a long breath before looking up at the bright orange sky. Damn, if I smoked, I could take a nice long drag right now and look kind of cool. I want to respond, to help her in whatever way I can, but I feel utterly useless. This kind of situation is one I've never been in, and I simply don't know the experience. I don't have the experience to say anything meaningful to comfort her. Akira looks over and evidently picks up on this much to my embarrassment. I must look pretty pathetic right now, whining about this to someone I barely know. Hardly, and I'm pretty much an expert on looking pathetic. She gives a chuckle, the act feeling like a personal victory for me. You're a good kid, Hisao. When I said that I approved of you being with my sister, I wasn't joking or just being nice. She picks herself up off the seat with a grunt, one that seems ill-fitting given her age, and throws the now empty can into the bin after one last swig. It's just unfortunate that it doesn't really count for much in this world. When I said that I was leaving for Scotland, I was doing it because a good position opened up in our company's headquarters. When our folks told me that when we were at the place, though, they also gave Lily a summons to rejoin them in Inverness. No way. Her evasiveness when asked about her future, that awkwardness that had steadily grown between us, that uncharacteristic outburst of anger, all of them suddenly fit into place. The same family that she reminisced about after Hanako's birthday party. The same family that left her in Akira to themselves after taking flight to greener pastures. Now I feel stupid for never cornering Lily on what's been bugging her. I never even considered if something had happened during her trip to her family's home in Inverness. And now a sense of unease grows in my chest. If her family has summoned her to join them in Scotland, all the other way on the side of the earth, has she accepted? Well, he hasn't told me whether she plans to accept it, and it seems she hasn't told you either. That's why I called you down here to talk, Asal. Context, huh? I sit back, my feelings of worry and frustration no doubt written all over my face. Lily's a strong person, Asal, but she's not infallible. I guess it's my job to worry about her being her older sister, but I think that you deserve to know. I understand. You okay? You sound depressed. No, I'm just thinking. That's good. Thinking is good. Being rash won't get you anywhere. She looks at her watch, barely moving her wrist. I gotta go. You be okay? I'll be fine. Don't worry. I'll have to talk to Lily about it and get everything sorted out. She gives a smile, but it doesn't feel all that genuine or sincere. Really, both of us are dancing around the fact that Lily's on the precipice of the biggest decision of her life and is trying to take the entire burden on herself. And part of that burden is the matter of our relationship. By the time I look up, Akira's already walking off with her hand held up. For the first time in a long while, I finally have an answer to something. Perhaps not even that. But at least I know I now have the right question to ask. Will you leave or stay? Okay, well, that is a very serious issue. Oh boy, okay. How's this gonna go? Hurry, Lily. I'm moving as fast as I can. I can barely make out Lily's voice over the deafening pounding of the rain. Even though I dislike pulling her around, the situation calls for it. I turn forward, my free hand over my head in a futile attempt to keep at least my hair dry. My vision seems to be in grayscale. This really is rotten weather for summer, and the last kind of climate I'd want for a date. A pity. I'd even checked the weather forecast beforehand, one of the few times I'd ever done so, only for it to say that Sunday afternoon would be fine. Looking to Lily, her shoulders are by now completely drenched, with her right hand holding tightly to mine and her left gripping her retracted cane. This horrid downpour came on just as we were between our destination and Yamaku, so we decided to try rushing the rest of the distance before the doubling back. Entirely unused to running this fast, Lily uses all her concentration just to avoid tripping over. Asao, do you know where we're going? Even she's reduced to shouting to try and be heard over the combined noise of the wind and the rain. The Sha! The rest of my voice is completely drowned out by even heavier burst of rain. The what? The Shanghai! How far is it? Shouldn't be far. It doesn't take long before I call out to her once again. Looks like we're safe. It's just up ahead. I quickly pull up to stop just in front of the familiar exterior, the lantern outside still giving off its reliable glow, and wait for Lily to catch her breath before going in. Ladies first. The tiny bell inside rings out when I hold the door open for her, a smile and a polite nod being reward before entering myself. I step in behind her and wipe my feet, only a quick glance is necessary to notice the distinct lack of activity. The Shanghai doesn't seem to get much in the way of patronage, and today is no different. Only a couple of tables are occupied. Summoned by the bells ringing, a most expected person comes to greet us. Welcome to the Shanghai. Yuko looks chipper today. Trying to predict her mood is pretty hard, but it's a nice change from the norm. Hello, Yuko. Hey. Good afternoon, you two. She takes a deep bow, somewhat taken aback as she rights herself again and gets a better look at us. What happened to you two? You both look damp. Her eyes drift towards the glass of the door behind us. Oh dear. We're inside now, at least. I think that's the most important thing. It's nice and cozy. You're lucky to be working inside today. It's been nice and quiet. I like days like this. Oh, wait, sorry. Is there anything you'd like? French vanilla tea, please. I'll have the same. Right, coming right up. She quickly skitters off with a determined look on her face, trying very hard not to forget our orders. If nothing else, she's at least dedicated to her jobs. I lead Lily to an empty seat before the two of us settle down. As usual, there's a large difference between my exhausted flopping down to my seat and Lily's delicate sliding into hers, her cane set beside her. For a while, I just idly watch the rain falling outside. The occasional person runs down the street trying to stay as dry as possible, hands often tightly gripping a rain-soaked umbrella. Lily sits just as quietly as I, her eyes closed as she intently listens to all that's happening. It's a comfortable, relaxing silence that exists between us, just the type that we'd so often shared together in the past months. For Lily, at least. I can't help replaying the words of her sister in my mind. At times contrasting them to both our time spent together since I entered Yamaku and to the way we've been since we started dating. No matter how much I try, I can't work Lily out. It's as if the harder I try to second-guess her emotions and her potential decision, the more difficult it becomes to reach a clear conclusion. It makes me doubt whether I'd ever really understood her. In the end, I'm going to have to ask, even though I very much want to avoid doing so. You seem quiet today, Hisao. Really? You seem so enthusiastic about taking me out on a date. I'd assumed you'd had something specific you wanted to do. No, not really. Just wanted to spend some time with you. Is that so? Fine. There was one thing. A little grin finds its way into Lily's face, her knowing full well that she's bested me. It makes what I want to say all the more awkward. It was just... Oh boy, here we go. Akira and I were talking. Oh? What's with the tone? You two do seem to get on well, don't you? Well, I do think she's a pretty cool person to talk with. It'd be nice if any of the teachers were anything like her. Cool. For a moment, I tried to place her tone of voice, my mouth curling into a smirk as I realized it. You're not jealous, are you? I'm not jealous. After her teasing me over such a thing on our first date, I don't feel too bad having a little laugh at her expense at this time around. As we settle down, though, it's only a minor distraction from the real point of why I brought Lily here. Don't worry, it was mostly just everyday stuff. That said, there was something Akira mentioned that I wanted to talk to you about. When you went to see your family in Inverness a while back, she said... Akira told me you about my family's summons, hasn't she? Seconds tick by while I try to read Lily's face, an odd mixture of feelings written on it. She seems annoyed, but also somewhat confused. Here. Yuko tentatively slides our drinks onto the table, her presence oddly small, and she skitters away. Correct choice, that's what I would do. As she walks back to the counter after a quick polite nod, I realize the air between me and Lily is thick and our expressions are both somewhat pensive. Even though she says I should lead my own life, she still interferes at the worst times. I don't think you should blame Akira here. She's just looking out for you. And it's not like I can't understand her concern over this. Lily's irritation gives way to an awkward and largely unsuccessful attempt to mask her feelings. She really doesn't deal well with being cornered on personal topics. I know, but I just wanted some more time. I knew you'd have figured it out eventually, but... You were intentionally hiding this from me? How long were you planning to do so? As I said, I simply wanted more time to think it through. I wanted to be sure of my decision before telling you. What did you decide to do in the end? I know what I want her to say, but an awful feeling refuses to leave my gut. My family does dearly want me to return to them, and Akira will be going as well. I could still teach as a career, whether it be here or there. So, you're going. How long have you known? I already know you were asked when you first went to Scotland about a month ago. Some time. Then that would imply that she was well aware of their decision before we even got into a relationship. Oh, dear. My frustration very nearly boils over. The fact that she's done this affects me more than it should. For her to not only be leaving, but to have been actively hiding her own plans from me, and after seeming for so long to be the one solid of support and reliability I could depend on. It feels as if the foundation underneath me is suddenly shifting drastically. Much faster than I could adapt to. Perhaps this isn't so much frustration as sheer unease. Lily. I'm sorry, I wanted to think this through completely. I wasn't trying to take advantage of you, please. I know, Lily. I know. This is just really sudden. And I guess this means that once you go, we'll be breaking up. For one of the few times I've seen since I met her, she's genuinely lost for words. She doesn't look surprised. No doubt because the fact that dawned on her once she became sure of her decision, but rather, she appears genuinely unsure of how to deal with the situation now that it's in front of her. We could try pursuing a long-distance relationship. They're getting more and more common these days, after all. Even as she says it, the tone of her voice gives away that she doesn't truly believe what she's saying. Lily's far too old-fashioned to be able to cope with a relationship without any kind of physical presence. And even I am, to an extent. All we would ever be able to be to each other would be a voice from the other side of the world. In the end, trying to rationalize everything is futile. Any attempts to try and connect what's happening with the future or past just seems to get more difficult the more I concentrate. Those quiet moments when we just walked side by side, the precious time we spent with Hanako and Akira, the casual chatter we had during lunchtimes, the times we made love, the confessions of our feelings to each other. All pointless. All just a fleeting moment in our young lives. Oh boy. We're just two children pretending to be adults, aren't we? A long, long silence hangs in the air between us. The noise of the other patrons drinking and talking only makes the situation feel more strange and disconnected. Lily's face remains low, her dejected expression clouding it. I'm sorry, Hisao. A simple apology and no more. She's left entirely without any further response or comment. With a long sigh, I gather what's left of my thoughts and ask the final question I have for her. When will you be going? I'll be leaving with Akira, so it'll be a little less than a week. The beginning of summer holidays? Just a little afterward, yes. Her tone is unusually slow and steady, her apologetic and depressed mood all the more written to her face as she tries to hide it in her voice. In the end, I can't even keep my promise of going to Tanabata with her before she leaves. I look down, seeing my face reflected into the now lukewarm cup of neglected tea and sitting in front of me. Really thought I'd left this kind of expression behind. For a while, I just stared down into the still surface, trying to sort through my emotions to get at what cause of action I should take, whether it be right now or in the future. But just as before, the effort is wasted. I glance up to see Lily gently sipping her cooled tea without complaint. Her face drawn and shoulders slumped, she looked to be in deep in thought, too. A strangely cold atmosphere coming between us as we isolate ourselves to mull things over. Even as Lily's cup slowly empties, mine remains untouched. It's a long time before I notice the rain dying down outside and the few other patrons of the Shanghai having left. The chill of the rapidly darkening evening permeates the dormitory hallways. While trudging down the corridor to my room, I see an unwelcome movement from up ahead. Sure enough, the opening of the door opposite mine heralds the arrival of a bespectacled Kenji. Hey man, what's... Whoa, dude, you look awful, I think. You okay? He really has a knack for making any situation better, doesn't he? I don't really want to go into it. It's late. Okay, that's cool. If you ever want to talk about it, I'm, here. I look at him for a moment before surrendering my stern front and awkwardly scratching the back of my neck, embarrassed by my standoffish response to him. Thanks, Kenji. Hey, it's cool. That's what friends are for, right? Yeah, you're right. See ya. Huh. That's a different type of interaction. I open the door to my own dorm room and close it behind me as he quickly waves me off. The solid thud the door makes against the doorframe sounds out a final call for the life I've led since coming to Yamaku. I just stand in my darkened room, fruitlessly attempting to work out what I should do from this point onwards. What should I do? I don't know how this is going to go, and I don't have anything vaguely resembling a concrete idea of how exactly he should be reacting or responding to any of this. Quite frankly, the fact that he was able to be so chill about it at the exact moment is fairly admirable. I can imagine a few situations where some people would fly off the handle, but more about that. As class ends, I simply rest my head on my hand and stare out the window to pass the time. It's been a few days since Lily told me her plans. I haven't been to our ordinary lunchtime haunt since then. Not that there would be much point. Hanako's been busy with the newspaper club since she's joined, and has even begun talking in class with Naomi every now and then. Even Lily, aside from the fact that a meeting between us would have been awkward in any case, has been run off her feet with class representative duties as the summer holidays approach. And now they're just about here. With the end of today's bell, the summer holidays will have begun. I suppose all I'll end up doing will be visiting my parents for the duration and lazing about my old home, now that my previous plans are entirely askew. Meanwhile, Akira and Lily will be en route to Scotland to live out the rest of their lives there. No matter how hard I try to rationalize the idea that once the summer holidays begin, my life will return the way it was, it simply refused to happen. Everyone's moving on with their lives. Lily's rejoining her family, Akira's moving up in her father's business, Hanako's gaining new friends and hobbies, and even Yuko's moving ahead with her university aspirations. Even I'm moving forward in the end. With the grades I've gotten so far in Yamaku, much less after such a rocky beginning, the path to get into teaching science as a career seems straightforward. I suppose I should at least be happy about that much, but it doesn't really seem to help. Yeah, can't imagine that it would. Ichan! I quickly stopped my ruminating and turned to face the bubbly voice beside me, putting on the most upbeat expression I could muster. As expected, Shizune stands flanking her. I have a sneaking suspicion they want something from me. Hey, Misha, Shizune, what's up? Well, Shi-chan and I were thinking. Since we're just two poor little girls that need help with all the work we've been given just before the holidays begin, sure, I can help. But Hichan, we really need... What? I think I broke Misha. Even Shizune raises an eyebrow at her accomplice's sudden stopping in her tracks. You'll help us, Hichan? I just said I would, didn't I? It's hardly like I have anything better to do. Maybe helping them with their work will help take my mind off the situation. Misha seems genuinely ecstatic with my response, but Shizune's expression is clouded and difficult to read. I find myself quickly averting my eyes from her own, as it almost looks like a face of pity. No doubt it must just be my imagination. It's hardly the first time I've been in the student council room. Indeed, I found myself down here often, either to help Lily with class rep work or to sort out one thing or another with the student council itself. Now, though, it's quite a different place. Papers and folders are strewn across every table. In the room, only a solitary little black laptop atop single desk sitting out from the mess. Looks positively ancient, and I guess it had been valiantly serving its task and archiving information for years and years. So, what needs doing? This looks like a lot to do. Shizune's expression becomes determined as she signs. It's a worrying look. Everything, Hichan. My worry was well placed. Everything you say. What's left on the desk is what needs to be done. It all needs to be digitally recorded, which is what the laptop is for. And I'm guessing that I'll be the one doing this. Shi-chan says she saw you with the computers in the library a few days ago and that you seemed really good with them. Good with computers? I can touch type, I guess, but it still seems like an overestimation of my skills. Ain't that a mood and a half? Everyone always assumes just because I use computers for my line of work that it means I know how these things work. Sheesh. I was just typing up homework. Wait, Shizune was watching me do that? One must know their allies before they can know their enemies, of course. Well, that's pretty wise. For once, it's not very hard to work out who said what. Nonetheless, it doesn't seem worth fighting over. Sitting at a computer doing some typing hardly seems onerous? I don't know. As far as tasks to help Shizune and Misha go. Difficult. Besides, it'll help take your mind off things. Take my mind off things? Take my mind off what things? Misha's face goes blank as she translates this for Shizune, though the latter's response is only to glance away toward the window after briefly signing. Misha's face quickly returns to a smile as she translates back. She was confused, I guess, but Shizune is harder to put down. I was just thinking you may like to get your mind off the exams, of course. Either way, we may as well get into it sooner rather than later. I'll go along with you. That's the spirit, Hichan. And that's the 5th spreadsheet compiled and saved. Time for next month's. After a little bit of fussing around, we all managed to get a bit more organized. Shizune's been gathering up the loose sheets and thankfully sorting them into a neat pile next to me. Meanwhile, Misha's been handling the manual writing work, her girly pink pen leaving its unmistakable mark on paper after paper. Once I got myself into a rhythm, this really wasn't so bad. Shizune and Misha also seem to be in the swing of things, wordlessly communicating as they go about their business with fervor. I periodically glance at the sheet beside the laptop, apparently a list of student names and matching addresses. As I dutifully enter the data written on it, I don't pay a lot of attention to what I'm typing in until I reach about midway down the page. Hakamichi, class 3-3. Huh, her family's home is in Saitama. My idle curiosity is ended abruptly as 3 light taps can be heard rapping on the door. Misha quickly steps over to check who it is tapping. Shizune's shoulder on the way past to let her companion know what's happening. Tapping her shoulder, gotcha. You're here! Who is it? With a slight pause to enter Shizune's data into the file along with the others, I look up to check who's at the door. Lily? After giving a cursory nod to Misha in greeting, she perks her head up in her trademark manner. Is that Hisao? She's pretty darn good at working out my voice on the smallest of phrases nowadays. Yeah, it's me. Hey. The atmosphere feels slightly awkward as she bows. Neither of us knows quite how intimate we should be around each other, given she's leaving in just a matter of hours. This is, in fact, thankfully, neither the oblivious Misha nor the hardworking Shizune pick up on. So, you've got work to do as well? Unfortunately, I arrived as soon as I could, but my class held me up with a surprise farewell party, and I had to get changed. I glanced down at the laptop's clock. It's pretty much the end of lunchtime, so I'm guessing Lily managed to wrangle the last period off as well. I take it Shizune is here as well? Of course. And I've been here during all of lunchtime as well. That last comment was really not needed. Shizune's baiting Lily into another argument. I can feel it. I'm sorry I can't be as hardworking as you, Shizune. I'll endeavor to hire more lackeys to do my work in the future, I assure you. And Lily just took the bait, escalating things further. But aren't you the one always outsourcing work to your classmates? The difference is that they choose to help, unlike your tyrannical grip on your own class. Tyranny works. Even if we did things differently, we still get the same results, right? This is school, not a police state. You'll have to remind me when you were appointed class monarch, I'm afraid. Anky face. You have to seize power. It's not as good if it's just handed to you. But I guess you wouldn't really understand that, right? You also have to remind me when monarchs were elected into their positions. Lily positively bristles at this. Shizune's two-hit combo forces her onto the defensive. Yet for all your vaunted power, you cannot get but one person to help you without forcing him. But Hisao volunteered! He's such a hard worker! He's doing this instead of meaningless socialization, right? Is that so, Hisao? No, this is bad. I've really ended up on a rock in a hard place. As much as it may pain me to do this, the truth has at least a chance of stopping this argument here and now. It's okay, Lily, they didn't harass me to come or anything. Lily gives me a disapproving grimace, silently radiating her strong feelings of displeasure in my general direction. She can be quite scary when she wants to be. Thankfully, that isn't often. Hee-chan, you make that sound like it's a regular occurrence. It isn't. In the end, it doesn't matter so long as everything's getting done at a good pace. Let's just get this work over with so we can go home. Shizune snorts derisively and gets back to marking off the sheets in front of her, while Lily sighs and finds her way along the room with her hand following the filing cabinets lined along the wall. This would mark the only time I've managed to successfully defuse one of these situations, but the grudging ceasefire built around mutual fear and respect makes this feel more like a Cold War than any real peace. Can't really take any credit, though. Lily's leaving has surely affected Shizune to some extent to make her give up so easily. Moments before getting back to my work, I noticed Lily reaching up to grab something from above a filing cabinet. I almost offer to help, but her height gives her ample ability to take it down safely. Once she sets the strangely shaped device on the desk beside me, I realize just what it is. Sort of, as she takes the old green covering off and sits down. At first glance, it seems to be an old metallic blue typewriter, but it doesn't take me long to realize it's far from ordinary. It has far fewer keys than expected, and thus it has show no letter printed on them. Only the shadows cast by the tiny braille dots on them give a hint of the thing's purpose. Blind typewriter? No, this? Well, you're not far off. It's normally called a Perkins Brailler, but it's basically a typewriter for the blind, yes. It presses braille into the page rather than text, which is why it has fewer keys. Huh. It's really neat. She gives a lighthearted grin at my curiosity over it. I have to admit that it appeals to my sense of novelty. Without further ado, we each get back to our allotted tasks. The loud clunking of the mechanics and Lily's brailler and the tapping of the laptop's old and weary keyboard quickly fill the room. It's a nice atmosphere, really. Everyone knows what they have to do, and Lily and I have to get to sit beside each other and exchange the odd word as we work away. Nostalgic. That's what it feels like. It's pleasant, but just slightly stained with the knowledge that our time together is nearing its end. Excuse me, Misha. To properly address her, Misha bounces off from the filing cabinet she's peering into. In spite of Lily's lack of sight, for a moment I think it's strange, but then realize it's exactly what I do. What's that? Could you ask Shizune where the attendance records for Class 3-2 are? I think they've been moved. Okie dokie. And with that, she litters off to Shizune, who's working at a table behind us. Lily's familiarity with the council room and the efficiency with which she works reminded me that she, Misha, and Shizune used to all work together in the student council. Yeah, this is a fitting end for her stay in Yamaku. Working away just like she used to, surrounded by those she loves and at least liked. I look up, getting taken off guard by Shizune sorting through a drawer rather than Misha. Sure enough, she plucks out a manila folder entirely blank save for just barely visible bumps on its front and holds it in front of Lily. Lily's hand flits over it to check what it is, her fingers feeling out the dots of braille and confirming it's what she asked for. Thank you, Misha. No reply. No reply, that is, save for an odd grin. No smile on Shizune's face. A couple of seconds pass before Lily clicks that it isn't Misha behind her, but Shizune. Her momentary lack of surprise is replaced by a slightly bashful smile. For a few moments, the room is all but silent. Eventually, though, Shizune strides back to her workstation and Lily begins typing once again. It only lasted a handful of seconds in all, but it feels like years of communication were made up for in that one silent exchange. Some slight repairing of the damage, I guess. That's actually really nice. There, finished. I leaned my head back and rubbed my eyes to try and work away their weariness. Staring at that small and rather poor screen has taken its toll. Excellent timing! The only thing left to do is file these away, and I'll have my workload finished as well. Good. I can pack up the brailer and put it away while you do that. Thank you, Hisao. Misha, are you and Shizune far from being done? I look around for the two as I replace the cover over to the brailer, only to see them waiting at the door. I guess they must be waiting for us. With a minimum of wasted time, we file and pack up everything that remains and join them. Thanks for waiting, you two. We couldn't just take off without you, Hichan. You've been a great help. Shizune nods, approvingly pleased with my efforts. I guess that's the last class representative work done and over with, then. That's right. I'll miss you, Lily. I think it was fun working with you. Thank you, Misha. It's been good working with you. And Shizune. Shizune thinks for a moment before formulating a response. It's not that she often communicates without thinking, quite the opposite, but this time it's even more considered than usual. Misha looks a little surprised before passing on the message. Shizune says, you'd better do your work over there better than you did it here. Far from taking offense, Lily giggles into her hand. If that's the case, then please tell Shizune to give those still here a little more understanding in the future. Competitive until the last. Maybe Shizune and Lily aren't so different after all. Shichan says that she'll be checking to make sure you live up to your end of the promise. And that's how it'll be. I'd better be off then. Goodbye, Shizune. Goodbye, Misha. Hisao? Lily takes a hold of my arm in hers, there being no need for a cane if I'm here to guide her. With a nod of farewell to the two, we set off out the door and make our way to the school grounds. As I turn to wave goodbye to them, I notice Shizune's gaze lingering on Lily. They may annoy each other, but family bonds aren't easily broken. Got all your papers sorted then? Yes, they've all been filled out and handed in. On top of things as always, aren't you? She gives an earnest smile at the compliment, but it feels as if her happiness is just a veneer over the fact that she's fully aware of how much she's leaving behind. It reminds me of how she was like when I first met her. Always smiling, always that little bit aloof, always that little distance away from everybody. Even now, she still maintains that air around many others, especially those she's not close to. I'd hoped that our time together would have changed that fact. Our pace slows, the two of us coming to a halt in the all but empty school gardens. Hisao, is something the... Lily's words are cut short as I turn and wrap my arms around her, pulling her tight. I may not usually be given to such impulsive actions, but I just want to be close to her, even if it's the last time I'll be able to. All the other students have retreated to their dormitories and homes, only the ruffling of leaves in the breeze making any sound whatsoever. As I draw back, I can see her dropping her carefully maintained smile. Her hand hesitates, wanting neither to leave nor to stay on my features. She's putting up a brave show, but her slight trembling gives her away. Lily may be able to control herself well, but even she can't hold her composure together now. This is the woman I've come to love, but also the one who in all too short a time will leave the country forever. I'm sorry, Hisao. It's okay. You've got your own life to lead, after all. We walk up the hallway in the girls' dormitory hand in hand, our emotions by now largely quelled. Nevertheless, our hands grip each other's much more tightly than before. Faint, muffled voices can be heard from Lily's room, the origins of which aren't difficult to guess. The moment she opens the door, Hanako bursts through and wraps her arms around Lily, taking her very obviously surprise. Lily! Hanako? I'm gonna miss you, Lily. As expected, she's on the verge of tears. As am I a little! Lily gently rubs Hanako's hair with her hand in response, then pulls back and gives her a warm, reassuring smile. Looking beyond Hanako, Akira can be seen getting up from the side of Lily's bed and scratching her head. Her eyes turn from Lily and Hanako to me, a stilted, weak smile hanging on her face. I try to return a more genuinely happy look, but the result is probably just the same. Is everything set? Managed to hold back from killing Shizune? The comment draws an amused giggle from her sister. Yes, I have everything in order, and yes, I managed not to. Have you packed everything you need? Got the 2 bags right here. There's still some stuff left at the Hakamichi's home. I can pick that up while we wait there for tomorrow evening's flight, though. Akira gives the large 2 black traveling bags on the floor a hearty pat. She probably came to help pack and make sure everything was in order on Lily's end before going together with her. Lily, will you be okay over there? I'll be alright, I assure you. I'll have Akira looking after me as well, and you know that she's reliable. But don't worry, Hanako. I have your phone number after all, so we can stay in touch. With Akira's help, I could send you things over the internet as well. Hey, don't use me just because you won't learn how to use a computer. Hanako and Lily both giggle briefly. The moon lightens ever so little. That goes for you too, Hisao. I promise I'll contact you once I'm in Scotland. I know. I'll be looking forward to it. I'm actually tearing up. Her offer may be kind, but we both know that this is tantamount to breaking up. Neither of us have any illusions as to how we'd manage a long-distance relationship. With nary a word of prompting, the four of us begin the long, solemn walk to the school gate. The numerous lamps scattered around the Yamaku grounds fail to do much more than provide pinpoints of light to an otherwise dense darkness. A car parked on the road just outside the school grounds comes into view, its shining black exterior reflecting the dimly lit lamps of Yamaku. I call out to Akira in an effort to alleviate a bit of the heavy atmosphere. Hey, your car? What kind is it? Don't know much about cars, do ya? It's a Lancer Evo, or Evo, I don't know. Solid and speedy. Well, it's not as if her comment on my knowledge is off the mark. I've never really taken an interest in them. She gives a small sigh. She's been good. Pity I have to part with it tomorrow, just like the summer house. You guys were the last to visit it before it changed hands. Turning back my rather faulty attempt at small talk, I glance at Hanako and Lily following behind us. By rights, Hanako should be leading Lily, but it's rather definitely the other way around as she clings tightly to Lily's arm. It's a depressing sight. So, I guess this is it. Indeed. Although the time for everyone to say their farewells is now, nobody really wants to take the first step. It's as if the longer nobody speaks, the better chances of them simply not leaving. Lily, do you really have to go? I'm sorry, Hanako. I won't be leaving you forever, though. I can still call you. Hisao will still be here as well. I nod, but Hanako just clutches all the tighter to Lily's arm. After spending so long without anyone to call family, it must be excruciating to have to say goodbye to the one person that was as close to a mother as anyone could ever have been in your life. Lily lets out a long, sad breath. All Akira and I can really do is stand by quietly on the sidelines, since the only person that can solve this would be Lily herself. Eventually, Lily pulls her arm from Hanako's grip and holds both of her shoulders gently, a much more decisive way of address than I've ever seen Lily take with her. Hanako, remember when we first met? When you entered my room for the first time after overhearing my consoling of a friend? You didn't say a word for the entire night. Even as I poured you tea and talked, you sat silently and simply listened to what I said. It took many quiet meetings like that before you began to open up to me, but as you began to, I felt some of the happiest moments I've ever felt. I didn't become your friend because I pitied you, Hanako. Oh, okay, I'm tearing up now. I became your friend because I knew you were not hiding. I knew you were hiding not just from me, but from everyone. Your ambitions, your personality, interests, tastes. I didn't know any of them, and neither did anyone else. As you showed yourself to me, though, I began to realize the person that you were, and became sure that our meeting was a very special moment. But Lily cuts her words short as she brings her hand to Hanako's head and brushes her bangs to the side, gently pressing her lips to Hanako's forehead. As she pulls her head back, leaving Hanako all but speechless and her eyes moist, Lily beams a wide smile. I believe you are a very beautiful person, Hanako, and I'm certain that you will become a strong and confident woman. You are a very dear friend and someone who I love very much. Just like Hisao, I will never forget you for as long as I live. I may be leaving, but you have your own life here to lead, just as I do. You have your own friends and hobbies, and your own hopes after graduation. I want you to devote yourself to them, even after I'm not around anymore. That is why I think you'll be okay, because you are your own self, with your own life. You yourself proved that to me. Hanako lowers her head in embarrassment, but nods as she does so. I understand. I know I have to say goodbye. I know you have to go your own way. But thank you, Lily, for everything. Thank you, Hanako. Will you be okay? There are a few seconds of silence before the answer comes. I will. Lily smiles, undoubtedly at least partly in relief. That makes me very happy. Then, goodbye. Goodbye, Lily. And farewell to you as well, Hisao. Goodbye. I'll miss you. She pauses for a moment before walking up to me. Her right hand outstretched in front of her takes a hold of my shoulder. Her left hand slowly and daintily reaches towards my face, taking my cheek in her palm. For a while, she simply holds my face, her fingers just slightly moving to take its contours. Usually her hand would be warm when doing such a thing, but the night air has given her skin a cool edge. I'm not sure how long we stay like this. Her clouded eyes pointed just below my own as she wears a wistful, almost distant smile. Eventually, though, I take her cold hand in mine. It's difficult to do so, but with a slight sigh, I gently remove her hand from my cheek. I hope you have a long and happy life, Lily. No matter where you might go. Thank you. I'll big sure to. She takes a long, trembling breath before turning slightly towards Akira's direction. Akira? Okay. With a nod, she takes Lily's hand and begins to guide her to the car parked outside the gates. They both walk slowly and deliberately, as if their movements had been rehearsed in advance. It's strange to feel like this now, watching somebody leave Yamaku. The feeling of unease I have now reminds me of the first time I walked through those black wrought iron gates. Always looked far too pompous for what they were. As they leave, all of us know full well that our lives are irreversibly changing. I'd always told myself that I'd just have to take life as it comes, but everything changing so fast, so suddenly. In the end, Lily's an irreplaceable part of the lives of both Hanako and me. The noise of Akira opening the passenger door for Lily brings me out of my thoughts, her hand waving back as Lily gets in. See you guys. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, Hanako. Goodbye, Hisao. Hanako's hand quickly shoots up her face, brightening by her enthusiastic farewell. Goodbye, Lily. Goodbye. See you, Akira. And goodbye, Lily. The door shuts as well as... my brain is all full of goo. I'm sorry. Okay. The door shuts as well as we all put our best happy farewell faces on. Akira getting in the car herself and starting it up as in short measure. Okay, Lily's hand can be seen waving through the tinted windows, both of our hands waving high as well. Just as every other time I've done such things, I can't quite work out precisely why I, or Hanako, were to give to her, given that she'd never see us doing so, but it doesn't matter. Even after that black, shiny car goes down the hill and disappears into the dark sky, we carry on waving and seeing Akira and Lily off. And then, they're gone. A strange stillness takes over our hands as our hands return to our sides. I don't quite know what I should do or how I should feel. In the end, we just stand there silently staring at where the car disappeared from sight. Goodbye, Lily. All I can do in response to her quiet, mournful goodbye is to place a hand on her shoulder. She looks at me for a few moments before looking back down at the hill, secure in the knowledge that I'm still around for her. What we'll do from now doesn't seem all that uncertain. We all have our own ambitions now, just as Lily said. But even so, it feels like a certain missing part in both of our lives now. Something that can never be replaced. Pain! Pain. I don't even know where the story could go. I honestly have no idea. The snap of my mobile phone's closing contrasts with the ambient chatter and noise audible even in the hallway outside the library. It's the first day of the summer holidays, a time that has perpetually seemed so far away, and yet it's now not only here, but also made painfully obvious by the students, or lack thereof, left in the school. Most students have returned home to spend the holidays with their relatives by now. The few that are left are mostly chatting between themselves, usually about what they intend to do in the coming weeks. It makes me feel like an odd one out for taking advantage of the school library being open for the first several days of the holidays. Ostensibly, it's for students to drop off any books they borrowed and have yet to return, and for those who have their parents pick them up to help pass the time until they get whisked away. thanks to the recent lengthy phone call from my parents, which had so rudely woken me from my sleeping on a beanbag at the back of the library, I'm now in the latter category. Sliding my phone back into my pocket this time, remembering to set it to silent, to go back into the quiet and wholly placid room. It's a nostalgic sight. Just as when Lily first led me to the library, the orange tint of sunset bathes the room in its light, while Hanako sits on a beanbag silently reading and Yuko fusses, just barely visible behind the counter. Hanako especially has been noticeably more quiet than usual since yesterday's happenings, but I can't really blame her. It wasn't just me that depended on that person after all. I quietly walked back to the beanbag near her where I had sat before, being doubly careful not to make any unnecessary noise. The soft puff it gives as the bag takes my weight makes Hanako's eyes flick towards me, but only for a second. I get the feeling that Hanako's been quiet out partly out of sadness following Lily's departure. Rather, she seems more thoughtful and measured than I expected, perhaps due to her desire of working on how to deal with Lily's leaving rather than just being depressed over it. Makes me a little proud of her. Hey, Hanako. Yeah? Still going ahead with your idea of traveling? She gives a determined nod. I'll be starting in a day or two. Naomi's decided to come with me, too. Wow, quick start. Where you two headed to first? I think we're gonna start by going north, then loop down and go southward. So, Hokkaido's going to be first. She gives another nod, more tentative than the last. The significance of that place is not lost on either of us. Do you know how you're gonna handle the traveling expenses and accommodations? Yeah, I've worked everything out. I think it should be okay. Naomi says she has her side worked out too. You know that if you need anything, you can just call, right? Gave you my number before. Any time of the day is fine. She gives a smile, which in itself feels like a small personal victory. I know. Thanks, Asao. Maybe Lily was right. Although I may offer Hanako any help I can possibly give, I feel as if I know she doesn't need it. She really has grown. Hanako's plans for her holidays are in sharp contrast to my simple following of my parents' suggestion to stay with them. Holidays had always made me feel less excited than most, though, so maybe this is just a return to the status quo. Before my heart attack, I'd always lived so aimlessly that holidays weren't all that much different from my everyday life anyway. After school, I'd wandered around a bit in the city, often hanged out with some friends before making my way home to eat dinner, and usually one of my parents, but rarely both. Their work schedules didn't leave much time for them to be home, and going there straight from school would have just meant I'd end up feeling bored. I was an urbanite through and through. Since coming to Yamaku, though, it feels like I've fundamentally changed as a person. The phone call with my parents eased any traces of doubt I might have held on in any case. While before I had exercised a fairly normal level of independence for a teenager, that being not a whole lot, my parents were more than pleased to hear of my newfound ability in taking care of myself. Laundry, cooking for myself, cleaning, all in addition to other general chores that come from living without parents around. Just little menial things I had to pick up on, but with relative ease. When I think about it, I always depended on them, even if I hadn't been at home all the time. To say I never depended on anyone after moving to Yamaku dormitories would be far from the truth, though. Excuse me. The two of us look up at the awkward, fidgeting figure in front of us. Some things never change. It's getting close to closing time, so, oh, right. I'd forgotten the library closes earlier during the holidays. Hanako and I both get up and dust ourselves off, placing our books back on the shelf behind us. The fact that our tastes in reading material have a fair amount of overlap is useful at times. With a bow to Yuko to apologize for taking so much time, Hanako takes her leave from us. See you tomorrow, Hisao. Bye. And with that, she walks out of the large wooden aging doors that herald the entrance of the library. She's a quiet person, isn't she? I suppose I should be surprised at a staff member sharing personal opinions like this, but after knowing Yuko for a while, it's largely expected. Our relationship is more personal, rather than one with her acting as an authority figure. Yeah, I think that's just how she is. She's got a lot more confidence in herself these days, though. I don't know her as well as you do, but I think I agree. It's nice to see her talking to people. She never used to do that before. Hey, Yuko. You know about Lily's leaving, right? She told me herself a few days ago. Must be hard leaving everyone behind like she is. She quickly looks back to me after she says this, probably remembering that I went to her for advice on the relationship between Lily and me before. You gonna be okay? That's a difficult question. It's something I'd rather not think about for now, though, given more pressing issues. Something seems kinda off about this whole deal, don't you think? Yuko appears to think for a while, absent-mindedly scrunching her face up in a variety of creative ways as she does so. I don't think I really know her well enough to make that kind of judgment. I'm sorry I can't be more help. No, that's fine. I'm just thinking out loud. I give a deep sigh and scratch my head in frustration. There's just so much stuff happening at once that I have no control over. Feels like I'm being swamped. I think everyone goes through times like that. What's important is to concentrate on what you can do rather than what you can't do. At least that's how I see it. If I didn't think like that, I don't think I'd be able to manage my life as is. She says it with a smile and a light tone, but her words are far from any kind of joke. Being pulled between two jobs as she is, just to hopefully make enough money not to only live, but also for university, must be exhausting. Perhaps that's why, coming from her, this feels like it has more meaning than it had come from most others. I guess you got a point there. Thanks for your advice once again, Yuko. She bows deeply and smiles again before making her way back to the counter where she spends so much of her time. The tiny wings of the cardboard crane and my fingers are only visible in the dim light of the room, just a little of the moonlight being able to peek through the curtains and around the edges. I lie still in my dark bed for a long time, idly looking up at the little origami bird. It feels like a lot's happened since Lily folded this, but at the same time, it feels like very little has changed. Compared to everyone else, I'm back to square one. I might have a newfound idea of where I want to go in life, but that's hardly the something that affects me now. A lot could change. I know that much. If anything, she just makes me feel like I've got no excuse to be like this, considering her previous situation. Lily, though. I turned the bird on my fingers another way, looking at it from yet another angle. When I first met her, she seemed aloof and perhaps somewhat distant. Her actions were always careful, measured and precise, and her carefully maintained composure always gives the appearance of unerring confidence and serenity. In time, she became less formal, just a bit, but enough. It felt good to see her lowering her inhibitions around me and opening up, even just a little. Of her own accord, it felt as if I was seeing her real self slowly become more vibrant and visible. Now, though, I'm beginning to have doubts. Perhaps they're to be expected after what is, effectively, the two of us breaking up. I don't feel new or strange, though, but rather like an old book being found and dusted off. I soon realized after meeting Lily that she saw me, as she did Hanako, as someone who needed help and care. At first, I simply thought we'd be fine as friends, helping each other through our limited time together in school. But then I began to treasure our moments together more and more. From our quiet walks to our talking over lunch, the good sides of her personality became even more obvious and even more likable. The absence caused by Lily's trip to Scotland to visit her long-distant family and sick aunt only made me realize how much I liked just being around her, and I thought that she'd felt a similar way. For her, though, maybe that wasn't everything to our relationship. Even after she returned to Japan, that just meant she lost her family once again after meeting them for such a brief time. She lived so much of her life without her family around, not to mention with Akira working long hours, that she had little choice but to be like that. And I thought her sense of independence to be good and admirable trait. It was in stark difference to my reliance on my parents before my heart attack, as reluctant as I may have been to admit it. However, it also meant that she never let people get too close to her. She lost her family, likely due to her blindness, went to a different school from anybody she knew because of it, and worked all the harder to make sure she didn't end up a burden on her sister and those around her. And now, Akira's going to Inverness, just like the family she thought she'd lost. She never told me of her plans, as conflicted as she was about them. Lily didn't want to be a burden on anyone, including me. I'm an idiot. I never questioned it. I never tried to be there or asked when she needed me to. I just set my life up and expected it to stay that way forever, with the two of us having a nice long relationship where we pushed forward towards our future together. A small pit of frustration and anger at myself wells up in my chest. I just let everything happen, never even trying to help Lily. Just her being there was enough. I thought I could keep going on if that were true. But that could never have been enough. It was a childlike dependence on somebody without any attempt to understand or help their situation. Thanks to that, I lost Lily. I lost the one person I loved most because I wasn't there for her when she needed me. With an increasingly angry feeling washing over me, I turn over and set the crane back onto my desk next to my clock, the place where it had lived since the day when she folded it for me. Since that day when she herself said that my burdens needn't be my own. The obnoxious bright red numerals of my alarm clock shine through the darkness of the room onto my tired eyes. 10 o'clock, evening. Curfew will be soon. I wonder. Akira mentioned they'd be leaving this evening. I know exactly when their flight is, but that means there's a chance, however small, that they might not have already left. I feel like those are very slim odds. Adrenaline starts to move through my body as I sit up on my bed, my eyes suddenly wide with possibility. There's no guarantee they haven't left. Indeed, it's like that they already have, but there's also a chance they haven't, however small it may be. Just this once. Just as I should have before. I stand up and rush to my cabinet, throwing on some clothes as fast as I can and sliding them on in quick succession. Each second that goes by is a second that I can't regain, a second that may mean the difference between catching them and losing them forever. Even if I fail, I have to try. I can't let her leave everything behind without even trying to stop her. Without just this once being there for her. With that last of my clothes slipped on, I hastily grabbed the phone off my desk. Luckily, the number for a local taxi company is still in my call history. A gruff, unenthusiastic voice announces the name of the company while I pace around the room. It takes some effort to slow down my voice and keep it clear over the phone. The chilly night air sweeps against me as I open the dormitory, but nevertheless, I keep up my brisk speed as I half jog, half run out to the school gates. It may not be curfew just yet, but it's precariously close. If there were a guard around, they'd no doubt have some questions for me, but it looks like I've managed to come out just before they arrive, or they're around the corner. My pace picks up as I make my way through the school gardens. Their nighttime are all but lost when I begin to run to the school gates. The lamps of the courtyard, dim as they are, provide just enough illumination to light the way and prevent me from tripping over. The buildings themselves take on a rustic, almost antique-looking edge when I glance at them. Looking back, it seems strange that they once appeared so dark and looming to me. Now they just look to be somewhat anachronistic school buildings, the same as any other spar their age. Leaving the gates behind me, I pull up onto a stop just before the taxi. Parked just as Akira's car had been, its gaudy and brightly lit sign looking out of place in the quiet country backdrop. I impatiently squeeze myself through the door, giving the driver the address for where the two should hopefully be staying. By the time the taxi pulls up after its trip at maddeningly casual speed, it's well and truly deep into the night. The house is truly enormous. Its sheer size much larger than I expected and ominous still. Fearing the worst, I ask the driver to stay just in case my efforts are for naught. A single press on the fancy intercom system outside the gate produces a short electronical melody in the otherwise silent road. It's not long before a somewhat deep, gruff voice can be heard from it. "This is the Hakamichi residence. Please state your name and why you're bothering us this late." Funny that I know who that is. I press on despite inwardly wincing at the reasonable annoyance audible in his voice. "It's Sound Nakai. I was hoping to meet Lily or Akira if they're still here." Surprisingly, I managed to summon quite some energy to my voice, enough to make the other side of the intercom silent. A few seconds pass, but just before I press the button again and ask what's going on, a light turns on outside the front door. I strain my eyes to try and make out who's coming through, but as he comes past a large parked car with fishing rods sticking out of the back, his identity becomes clear. His face is typically placid and emotionless as he saunters up to the gate. He's still childlike in his mannerisms despite his demeanor. With the presence of a few buttons from behind the fence, the gate slowly opens. "Sal, what are you doing here?" I think it's the most emotion I've ever heard from his voice. Not that it would be hard to reach the mark. Akira told me that she and Lily would be staying here before they left for their flight. I need to talk to Lily just one last time. Are they still here? The look on his face says everything. I failed. I was too late. The one time when I actually needed to act quickly and... Actually, it's possible. What? What is it? He's a bit taken aback by my forever, but I can't help it at this point. They left not long ago. Only a few minutes before you arrived, in fact. If you go straight to the airport, you might be able to... Hasal? I dart back towards the waiting taxi, grabbing what little money is left in my pocket as I go. "Thanks, Hideki!" With that, I take a seat and in short order bark out my destination. My chest beats wildly as I tear down the street. That's part of what I'm worried about! He's moving. He's getting very excited and moving a lot. My body twisted this way and that to slip between the pedestrians walking back and forth beside me. With the road solidly blocked by taxis and other cars, dropping off passengers and picking up others in the time they have to wait, we ended up having to stop almost a block away. But that's in the past now. What matters is reaching Lily. When one foot hits the ground, the other quickly following without the slightest thought, as if my legs had taken on a life of their own and all my mind can do is concentrate on the view ahead of me. Just one glimpse of that long hairs of hers. That long yellow hair that was the same color as the wheat that stretched as far as the eye could see. In the end, I depended on Lily just like Hanako did. Even after we started going out, it still doesn't feel like she really ever let herself depend on me. Except for one moment. That one moment where we held each other tightly on that bright yellow field. At the time, she must have feared losing me just she did everyone else. That's why just this once. The night air wraps around me, draining every last remnant of warmth out of my body to the extent that it feels like midwinter than a summer night. My fingers, my hands, my feet. They all feel increasingly cold. I don't think that's just the weather. The sound of the passing crowd is reduced to no more than a background hum while the sound of my shoes hitting the pavement echoes loudly, every step surging towards the person I have to catch. Forcing my chest tightening in response to the cold of the night, I rest an arm over it to try and settle it down. When the airport comes into view, though, I realize the feeling as one I've felt before. Not now. Of all the times for places for this, not now. I take a gulp and soldier on regardless, pushing my body as far as it'll go. Sweat pours off me as I hurtle forward, my shoulder hitting someone's side and my mind suddenly flooding with emotions and memories. I continue on without an apology. I have to keep moving now. If I stop, I'm not sure I could begin again. And even if I could, it would be all for naught if I'm not in time. I hit another person, then another, offering little resistance to getting bounced about. My feet feel numb. My arms are losing all feeling. My chest forces me to hunch over, awkwardly tightening even more. The afternoon in the snow. The time when my life irreversibly changed. Images of Wanako and that damned letter flash over in my mind. The first love I'd lost thanks to my condition. I can't let that happen again. I don't care what happens to me anymore. I just need to see her one last time. There! A sliver of yellow and white comes into view some distance down the road, her figure silhouetted by the lights emanating from the airport entrance. Lily! Lily! Lily, stop, please, Lily. Come on, Lily, I know your hearing's far beyond Gah! My view suddenly spins out of control and ends up on the ground. My body haphazardly sprawled after hitting someone and stumbling over. Before I can assess the damage, an unbelievable pain ignites in my body. Oh no. All my thoughts are blanked as I curl up and frantically clutch at my chest. Are you okay? It was a really bad fall. The pain. I can't. Any sharp knock could do me in. Any overexertion. I thought I could overcome my limits this once. Something's wrong with him. What's the matter? The voices of those gathered around me are gradually replaced by a loud ringing in my ears. By now, I'm unable to move my head. My eyes turn upwards to see the mute moving of their lips. Even as I clutch my chest, I realize I can't feel my fingers anymore, nor my feet. Feels like my entire body is shutting down, starting from my extremities. With one last effort, I turn my head down the road towards the airport entrance that's casting its light over me. Lily is there behind the crowd, her head tilted, but only just slightly. Oh God, no. I feel my vision dimming as I try to yell out, but nothing emerges from my mouth. Despite my best efforts, slowly but surely my vision begins to black out the scene before me. So, this is how it ends. I failed. I was so close. So very close, but at the very last moment my condition seized my chance at a new life and dragged me back. Now I'm going to die. Sprawled out just meters from an airport with a crowd of babbling people surrounding me and with Lily leaving for Scotland just a little distance ahead. Lee. That last word extinguishes the last of my energy. The world falls into a deep, inescapable blackness as every muscle in my body shuts down. I'm sorry, Lily. I was too late. I am barely holding myself together right now. Oh, God. Is he at least alive? What's going on? As I slowly open my eyes, a bright white light assaults my retinas. For minutes, I just lay where I am, mindlessly staring ahead while my scattered thoughts can coalesce in my slowly waking mind. Slowly but surely, the white begins to come into focus as a bare expanse begins to be drawn across my field of vision. It's only when the light fixture comes into view that my mind clicks that this is the ceiling above me. Slowly levering myself up, I silently absorb all my senses, the details of the room I'm in. The smell and taste of strong bleach hang in the air, leaving the impression of a place just slightly too clean to be natural. Inoffensive, pale peach-colored walls, all perfectly painted without a crack, stain, or imperfection. A single framed painting hangs on the wall, perfectly straightened. Like the walls, it's as boring and inoffensive as can be. My attention's grabbed by the translucent curtains waving across my vision, my eyes following it to open window it covers. When I move my right arm to try and lift myself up and look through it, I feel the catheter dig in uncomfortably. It's only now, too, that I notice the cannula tubes winding around my cheeks and into my nose. After some fidgeting, I settle for just looking around the corners of the window. Beyond the thick leaves of the several large trees, I can see the greenery below, backing out onto a field. A customary island of green on the outskirts of the city. Judging by the sun outside, it's noon. Of which day, though, I'm not sure. So, I'm in a hospital again. I let a long, tired breath as I try to collect my scattered thoughts, my mind seemingly cast in a dozen directions all at once with as many emotions running through me. After slowly lying back down, I decide to start at the beginning, why I'm here. I cast my mind back, but I can't work out a smooth recollection of what happened. The events of last night, or whichever night it was, come back as more a series of snapshots than any cohesive memory. Lying on my bed, looking at the origami bird, talking to Hideki outside the Hakamichi residence, running down the street, passing pedestrians and bumping into more and more of them, falling, looking at the searingly bright airport entrance, seeing Lily's back as I lay on the ground. The silence of the private room suddenly feels overwhelming. So that's it. I had my chance to correct my mistake, and I blew it. Whether I was at fault for neglecting my medication and disregarding to pace myself, or my body was for giving out so soon, it doesn't matter now. All that matters is that, once again, I'm alone. The pastel blue pillow yields with little resistance as I let myself back onto the bed, its starchy case along with the starchy sheets providing little comfort. Compared to the darkness of last night's events, the bright light of the room around me is striking. All it does, though, is emphasize how otherworldly places like this are. Arrhythmia. A strange word. A foreign, alien one. One that you don't want to be in the same room with. A rare condition. It causes the heart to act erratically and occasionally beat too fast. It can be fatal. It was a miracle that you were able to go so long without anything happening, they said. And then it did. My condition had taken away everything. My old school was of no importance anymore. My home was reduced to a faraway place. Both my friends and my first love simply stopped visiting after a length of time. I became cynical and embittered, distant and subdued. In my defense, no person could avoid that after such a thing happening to them, but nevertheless, I left the hospital as a very definitely changed person. Things changed. I made new friends in Hanako, Shizune, and Misha. I found a new sense of home in my dormitory, a new interest in science and the world around me, and I found direction in my life that I never felt before. But I'd also discovered other things. The sense of isolation in Yamaku and its surroundings was not entirely unwelcome. The quiet giving a peace of mind I might not have found elsewhere, but it gave the area a feeling of being pushed out of the way, of being kept out of sight. People in the streets would sometimes glance awkwardly or quickly turn their heads as they realized they were staring. Even if my condition wasn't visible, my uniform was. Even if it weren't, I was still different. I took 17 pills a day, morning, midday, and night. My scar, though hidden behind clothing, was still a permanent mark of my condition. And most of all, there was the very real possibility of death. A bad fall, an absent-minded hard hit on the back, a simple sprint taken too far. Anything could have set my heart off, and several times I teetered on the edge of the abyss even with all the care I took of myself. But that was fine. I could have lived with that. Because there was one final thing I'd found, or rather refound after entering Yamaku, which was once again snatched away from my eyes. It's only now that I realize just how delicate my newfound sense of happiness was. Everything depended on her. The linchpin of my life since I first entered Yamaku as a sullen, confused, and aimless transfer student. Lily Sato was the one person I could depend upon above all others, and who reciprocated the love that I felt for her. But I failed her, and only realized it all too late. I thought that I could just I thought that I could just set my life up and continue that way forever, but the real world doesn't work like that. I finally realized the meaning of those words, only to be struck down as I confronted by my failure to do so in time. The surroundings I'm in now are all too familiar. It's as if Yamaku was but a dream, and I'm still recovering from my first major heart attack. Maybe that's why I feel so tired. It feels almost as if I've lived the entire last few months of my life in the span of minutes. The weight of my eyelids closes my eyes, my physical and mental exhaustion letting me offer no resistance. Unintelligible mumbling from ahead of the bed stirs me out of my sleep. With my eyes still closed, I can focus and make out someone, presumably a nurse, bidding farewell to a doctor. As I open my eyes, I notice the door closing in my peripheral vision. The doctor stands reading some notes off a clipboard held in his hand, carefully looking over the pages. After consulting his obviously very important documents, he looks up and notices my gaze. It's now that I notice something slightly odd about his expression and general disposition, but I can't quite put my finger on it. "Ah, I see you're awake, Mr. Nakai." His quick glance to my bed to verify my name shows that his documents obviously didn't have it written on them. "I must admit this is a bit unfortunate. Your parents visited just earlier while you were asleep. I could notify them you're awake now if you'd like." Thanks. That would be good." I give a somewhat dazed reply, most likely the one he'd expect, before really thinking about what I was saying. "Not a problem. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, I'll be happy to answer them. That is, unless you'd prefer to rest. The anesthetic is still going to be affecting you a bit, I'm afraid." The anesthetic, of course. That's why it felt so strange the first time I woke up. I slowly shake my head, not wanting to dislodge any pipes or cause myself any more discomfort than necessary. The doctor politely puts down his clipboard in response. "I guess my main question is, what exactly happened? To put it simply, you've unfortunately had another heart attack. While not as severe as your first, you were very lucky it occurred so close to a hospital. After being stabilized, you were taken to the operating room. What followed was keyhole surgery in order to insert a temporary pacemaker. All in all, the incident happened 2 days ago, with emergency treatment being carried out very soon afterward. Since then, we've kept you under close observation while you were asleep. Will I be alright? Are there any lasting problems? Compared to the procedure carried out for your first heart attack, this was relatively minor. While you still have to undergo surgery once more in a few days' time to remove the pacemaker, assuming there are no complications, there should be no lasting implications." He continues talking, the subject shifting to a repetition of facts about erythema and my medications that I already know for the most part. I start to nod in faint interest when my mind drifts. I begin to think about how perfectly hung the inoffensive painting hanging on the wall behind his shoulder is, and how neat and sterile the surroundings are, even including the doctor himself. If my mumbling bores you, you're quite welcome to say so, Mr. Nakai. Lord knows I lose track of myself sometimes. He gives a short chuckle at his self-deprecating joke as I grimace awkwardly, having rather been badly caught out. The doctor's chuckle sounds different from that of the nurse at Yamako, though, come to think of it. As I ponder why, I realize that the man in front of me feels just that little bit off. His smile is neat and sterile. He delivers his little joke perfectly with a customary inoffensive chuckle. It's like rather than talking to the man whose name is neatly printed on the name tag pinned to his lab coat, I'm merely interacting with the actor reading off a pre-rehearsed script, every action having been choreographed beforehand. I suppose he has to be this way, being a doctor. He has to keep his neat and sterile smile while chatting to the girl with cancer slowly spreading throughout her body while reassuring the woman who will surely die from childbirth, and with every other terminally ill and critically ill patient. That little bit of distance, that little bit of aloofness. It makes you wonder if I've been too harsh. Especially considering it's a disposition far from being adopted only by people in his profession. After all, the one I loved kept the same distance from her other self. Looking up to the doctor again, I've been in thought with my head bowed for some time. I understand you must still be tired. You've been through a lot, and as I mentioned before, the anesthetic will still be affecting you. If you don't mind, I'll let you get some rest and tell your parents you've woken up for you. I think that would be good. Thank you. He gives a curt nod before picking up his clipboard and making his way to the large white door in the corner of the room, closing it behind him with a thud. In the end, I'm alone again. Lily's gone. Akira's gone. Hanako would be traveling, and even my parents have already left the hospital. 4 pale peach walls, 1 white ceiling, and 1 single open window to look out toward the world outside. It's hard to think of the future when the past is crowded around you, claustrophobic in its neat, sterile, starchy, bleach-smelling grip. Lost for what to do or focus on, I content myself with sleeping the time away as if they were all just another dream like Yamako had been. White. A sterile, clean white for a sterile, clean room. My eyes open and I simply stare at the ceiling for some time. It's about as interesting as the television would be, mounted by its metal rack hanging off the ceiling ahead of its bed. Indeed, the television saw its entire use during the time my parents were here. Left on quietly as they waited for me to wake, it was about as banal as it had been the first time I ended up in the hospital. Does anyone else hear that? Is that? Hisao, you need to make note of that right now. Earlier today, an attending nurse had offered to turn off the EKG speakers. I refused simply because the sound is so entirely normal to me now. It's almost comforting in a way. The metronome-like regularity gives at least some feeling that time is moving, even in a place such as this. Hisao, listen! After some time of listening to its beeping while I fully awakened, though, I realized there's another sound in the room. Concentrating all my efforts on listening, a task made rather easy by the lack of distractions, a tiny, tinny melody can be heard. Light and quiet, the music sounds almost fragile, as if dwarfed by the EKG's pulses. That's the music box. Lily had that with her. Tilting my head just slightly to the side in an effort to see the source of the melody without dislodging any of the sensors and pipes stuck onto me, I noticed a little wooden box sitting on the nightstand next to the bed. My mouth opens just slightly while I silently watch the tiny yellow metal drum slowly rotate inside, the little bumps on its surface gradually moving in and out of sight. The music box. It's the one I gave. The creaking of the door breaks me out of my reverie, my head and heart remaining still as my eyes turn to see who comes through. Long tan skirt, peach off-the-shoulder sweater, pale, almost porcelain skin, blue clouded eyes and long yellow hair. All I can do is stare as Lily slowly walks into the room, her fingers lightly running over the wall for orientation, and my mind comes to a shuddering halt. Lily? She stops mid-stride, her entire body tensing. Sal, was that you? Her voice is quiet and pensive, echoing her expression. I thought you were... Lily takes one tentative step forward, then another, as if she were holding herself back. Her control over her composure is for naught, though, and she finally rushes over to where I lay as the last of her resistances fall. I'm slightly taken aback when she grabs hold of me, hunching over as tears begin to fall from her cheeks. Since only minutes ago, I thought she was on the other side of the world. After a moment of hesitation, I rest my right hand on her soft shoulder. Hisao. Lily's body trembles as her tears blot the pale green sheets, her emotions flooding through her carefully maintained exterior. With her face now closer and made easier to see for her pale skin being lit by the sunlight from the window, I notice her cheeks being redder than they should be. It's okay, Lily. I'm okay. You don't need to. She rights herself quickly, her crying forcefully stifled with both sadness and stubbornness remaining in her moistened eyes. Her prideful nature, always having been something to contend with, takes me off guard. Stop telling me to not worry about you, Hisao. Just this once, let me cry. I'm caught speechless. She waits for a response, but her composure breaks again after a handful of seconds. I swallow hard to try and settle my own emotions while she weeps onto my bed, a strange mixture of relief and depression welling up. Lily's here. She's really here. If I couldn't feel her skin under my hand, I'd hardly believe my own eyes. My efforts weren't for nothing. My body's attempt to take away everything that was important to me once again had been foiled. But now, I don't feel as happy about it as I thought I would. Seeing her here crying like this over me. This is the one thing I wanted to avoid since coming to love her. No, ever since leaving the hospital. I'm sorry, Lily. It's my fault I'm here. I shouldn't have tried to push myself so far. And gives a self-deprecating snort. After months of keeping myself together so nobody would worry over me, I went and did something like this. Guess I'm pretty dumb. With a couple of sniffs and a long breath, Lily manages to pull herself together and calm down a little. Despite her red cheeks, moist eyes, and the lines of her tears still visible, she delicately wears that weak smile she seemed to so often give. You needn't blame yourself. I heard later that it happened as you were running down the road after me, right? Still. She wipes her eyes with the back of her hand, returning more to her old self as the rush of emotions wears off. Why did you run after me, Hisao? I moved to respond, but noticed her face tightening. Even after I'd said goodbye and left Yamako Academy. She takes a moment to steady herself, her emotions almost bubbling up once again. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Sorry? For the times when I wasn't there when you needed me. Until now, I thought you were just being there. You just being there would be good enough. I only needed you by my side to make any day feel better. Even if my body may be like this, I want to help you, Lily. To be there when you need someone. But you always were there, Hisao. Why did you want to go to Scotland, Lily? Why? Well, I told you before. Because Akira was going and because of my family's summons to their home. Why didn't you say that you wanted to go? I'm not stubborn often, but this one time I think I need to be. I want you to stay here, Lily. I want you to stay where everyone you know lives, and where all your dreams and ambitions were made. If you choose to stay, I'll never leave your side. I won't let you lose another person. When I had my heart attack, I was snatched away from everyone and everywhere I knew. You showed me a new life after I came to Yamaku. I'd lost my past, but you showed me a future. It's true that I hadn't always been there for you. I'm unreliable. Sometimes I lied, and I thought I'd come to understand you when I hadn't even understood myself. Be that as it may, I want to give you a future as well. I want to be there for you, to share both your burdens and your happiness just like I promised back in Hokkaido. I want you to trust me. I know I had problems coming to put my trust in you, after losing so many people I'd known after my heart attack, but that's how I know that being unable to trust others can feel awful. That's why I can't just watch you throw everything away like this. I never want you to go through what I did. I would do anything to stop that. You can be quite steadfast when you want to be, can't you? As I said, it's not often. My weak smile drops, though as the IV in my arm digs in a little, it's a harsh reminder of my tether to my condition. Lily's face tenses as I let out a small gasp of pain, immediately making me wish I'd stifled it better. All I can do is sigh in defeat. I tried to not let anyone worry over me for the entire time since I left the hospital, but I can't even stop the one person I love most from crying over me. Even if I might finally be able to put my feelings into words, they feel pretty useless with a body like this. Every time I tried to reach towards something, it was just snatched away, and even now only turned out for the better due to luck. I guess that's something else I should apologize for. All I can ever do is make you worry. Even now, there's very little chance I'll live anywhere near a full life. The feeling of Lily's warm, soft hand moving over my left cheek makes me lift my head up, her smile gentle and warm as she touches me. I think that is something very natural for you to say. You were always so sincere and self-conscious. You are also reserved and mild-mannered, and patient to a fault with Hanako. You're curious about everything and everyone. When I said I missed you while I was with my family, I wasn't lying or exaggerating. The thought of you was never far from my mind. It helped me through that time. That's why I was so confused about what to do when my family summoned me. Even after I thought I had made my decision, you tried your hardest to challenge me about it. I didn't confess to you out of pity, or believing you were somehow different from what you are. I confessed because I never want to lose you, and want you to always be a part of my life, no matter what might change. You are a very beautiful person, Hisao. Your heart changes none of that. So please don't apologize for yourself anymore. For a long time, silence regains in the room. I'm not really sure what this newly born feeling inside of me is, but it pales into insignificance as I wordlessly gaze at Lily's smiling face, warm and gentle as it has always been. It's only as her thumb crosses my cheek, wiping away a single drop of moisture, that I realize that that's all I've ever wanted. For what feels like the first time, I give an earnest, wide smile. As Lily feels it against her palm, she returns the gesture. More time passes before either of us say a word, neither of us needing speech to communicate our feelings to each other. I know I can't promise you that I'll always be around, or that we'll be together forever. With some difficulty, I slowly lift my hand, placing it on her pale shoulder. But I think I can at least take you to next year's Tanabata Festival to make up for making you miss this year's. Lily's expression is one of surprise, though I can't say I blame her. You remembered that? I've got a pretty good memory, sometimes. She raises her head a little and takes her hand from my cheek, giving a small, amused giggle. I smile absent-mindedly at how earnest it is, almost girlish in its lightness. Still smiling warmly, she collects herself and stands upright with a hand resting on my chest. It feels like I'm seeing her for the first time. The sun from the window glowing behind her just as it did when I first walked into the room when she was drinking tea. Very well then. Shall we make it a promise between the both of us to go to next year's Tanabata together? Even if she can't see me doing so, I nod approvingly. I promise. I promise. Oh my God. What am I supposed to say? That story was very chill and casual for a very long time until it decided to become very dramatic at the end. My goodness. Ladies and gentlemen and everyone in between, that was Katawa Shoujo. Emi, Hanako, Shizune, Rin, and Lily. I saw the different worlds where all of them played the major focus. I'd been asked to play this game for a very long time, and I'm happy that I was finally able to do it. I won't be forgetting anything about this game for a very long time, and I really hope you all enjoyed the ride. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you all soon. Akira, Lily, and I silently sit on the grassy embankment high above the local town, the breeze gently blowing through the cloudless sky. We may be just a few minutes' walk from our town, on a hill just outside its limits, but the view is entirely unexpected. Lily sits beside me, her eyes closed as the gentle breeze flows through her hair. This is a nice area. Yeah, I never knew a place like this was anywhere near Yamaku. And I had to be the one to find it, of course. Akira's grin is genuine, but her tone is slightly different from her usual carefree nature. It's good that you're out of the hospital, though, Hisao. Nobody's more glad than I am. I can't stand hospitals. So you two going back to school tomorrow? Yep. Akira chuckles in amusement, looking back out to the town below, the trees between the buildings swaying in the wind. Pity we couldn't go up north for the summer holidays or get to Tanabata. I wouldn't worry. There's always next time. You'll be graduating before the next summer vacation, won't you? Yeah, there'll still be college after that, mind. Going to the same one? Likely. We both have high enough scores to meet the entry requirements. You sound so sure. Don't worry. You're better than I in most subjects. I guess we'll work it out in due time. That's the way. Just enjoy yourselves in Yamaku while you're there. Lily gives a sad sigh at the distinction made between Akira and the two of us. Do you really need to go back to Scotland? Yeah, the folks are already out for my blood as it is. You weren't meant to stay this long? She gives her trademark wide grin. Setting my boyfriend up with a passport took some time. You're taking him with you? Just for a while at first. He's a surprisingly worldly guy, so I think he'll do just fine. Akira gives an amused snort. If our father had his way, I'd have gone a long while ago. I just couldn't pass up an excuse to stay with my favorite little sister a little while longer, though. She leans right and gives Lily a tight, playful hug, cheering her up considerably. It's nice to be with you one last time, though. For what it's worth, I'm in the same boat. Thanks, you too. I'll try and come back sometime, don't worry. It's a shame that business keeps you so busy. The place won't run itself, I'm afraid. And I think it's going to be just the same over there. Considering that, I'd better get going. Have fun over there, Akira. Will do. With a slight grunt, she lifts herself with her hands and stands up, dusting herself off as she does so. Well, I'd better be off. The plane won't wait for me, after all. She has a certain unusual wistfulness in the tone of her voice, her eyes firmly planted on her sister. I'll be okay, Akira. Yeah, I know. Come now, it isn't that bad. You'll be able to see us again soon. It is strange to have Lily reassuring and doubting Akira for once. She really has changed. Goodbye, Akira. Bye. For a second, the dark-clad figure looked down at the both of us, smiling widely. Perhaps more widely than I'd ever seen her do before. She lets out a long, slightly wavering breath to steady herself before leaving, but eventually slips her hand in her pocket and turns on her heel. And with that, she walks away, one hand held high in the air as she goes. See you later, you two. A jazz tune with no beat, melody, or direction to the very end. After a few moments of sitting silently, Lily and I pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off. Turning toward her with a broad smile, I hold out my hand. Shall we be off then? She takes my hand in hers with a gentle nod and a smile as beautiful and warm as ever. Indeed we shall, Hisao. As we set off toward the school, that wonderful smile engraves itself onto my memory. That wonderful smile that we both share. Our pasts may be scattered and at times overshadowed by sadness, but they're also an irrevocable part of our lives and personalities. Even if I could change a single thing, I wouldn't, because my past was what led me here. That's why, even with all that's happened to us before, and all that may well fall before us, together, we'll keep walking forwards. Forwards towards the future. Our future. This game is beautiful. In every sense of the term.